You have infinite ambition for your toys when you're very small, but very limited resources. And the adults, who are the people who are supplying you, because you're still too young really to go to the shops yourself and you don't have any money, they don't realise how much Lego you really need for personal fulfilment and development. And also things like Scalextric sets are really priced not to suit the ambitions of me at the age of 8. They were priced so that they came in neatly at a price point for my parents and their sort of average pockets. But to the child who gets it, it's got this stupid little oval of track that's, you know, not much bigger than this sofa, and it's just annoying. You need more stuff.
Go.
I think when you leave childhood with your toy ambitions unfulfilled, then it's a frustration that follows you for the rest of your life if you don't do something to exercise it. So I realised that I was compelled, really, by my inner darkness to do these things I dreamed of as a small child, to see if they were possible and if they worked and if people would enjoy them. And I'm glad to say they did. And spiritually, I find myself freer as a result.
Long live the Flying Scotsman! Go!
As with most of these programmes, I was always absolutely flabbergasted by the enthusiasm of people to come and join in what is really an utterly futile and really rather ridiculous exercise, like make plasticine flowers or bolt 80,000 pieces of Meccano together or whatever it was. But as we started doing each programme, the thing that kept emerging was this sort of latent desire people had to actually put normal life aside and go and all play together in a big sort of sand pit, except it was full of Lego, not sand. And I found it, I mean, I wasn't expecting this. I didn't think that would ever come out so strongly, but it did, and it was sort of rather charming, rather humbling in a way. I'm not trying to take credit for it because I didn't make the garden. I simply had the idea and you know, directed people towards this idea. But I thought it just looked absolutely fantastic. I just couldn't believe, A, how convincing some of it was, and just how sort of psychedelic and cheerful some bits of it were, and just how well the whole thing had come together. I mean, it was a cheesy garden design, deliberately. We didn't want to sort of detract from the miracle of plasticine artistry by coming up with a very, very clever, very, very alternative, abstract, challenging garden, which I know is what a lot of people do at Chelsea. We just made a sort of cartoon country cottage garden thing and then made it out of plasticine. But it was just, I thought it was great. And a lot of people liked it, and people who didn't like it, I ceased to admire them. The thing I loved about our finished Spitfire was that it looked like a Spitfire and it looked like an Airfix model, because it wasn't quite right, but you knew what it was supposed to be, but you could see that it was Airfix. You know, a couple of bits of it was slightly wonky and the paint wasn't exactly the right colour, but I loved that because I thought that looks like it's been made by the hands of children who can't quite wait for things to dry, and it made it very sort of magical. My dad rang up and he said, of all the things you're doing, I'm most interested in this Airfix project, because I remember how obsessed you were with it, and that it was actually me that got you into it. And of course my dad used to help me make Airfix models, because that's what your dad does. And I said, well, yeah, come along on the day when we're doing the build, and I said, you might have to hang around a long time because it's television and it takes a long time to do this stuff. And he says, no, that's fine. So I booked him and my mum into a hotel, and then when I mentioned this to the producer, he said, well, he should be in it. And I thought, well, yes, I suppose he should, because it's because of him that I've ended up here trying to realise this deep-rooted Airfix ambition to do one full size. And he was actually quite useful because he's a sort of technical man, worked in industry and so on, so he had some very good ideas about picking things up and sticking them together and putting the paint on. Although the students were the least able to explain how they could make theirs work, their idea was so amusing and so clever and so obviously inspired by Drink, really, that we just wanted to use that one. So we then, combined them with some expert engineers to make it work. But it was quite an ambitious idea. When we devised the bridge idea, we believed the canal was something like 9 or 10 feet deep. So we thought, well, if I fall off, that doesn't matter, and it's quite amusing because I'll just fall in the canal, then I can get out of the steps and have another go. But gradually, in order to make the bridge mechanism work, it had to be raised and raised and raised on wooden plinths until it was more than twice as high as it had been originally. And then we discovered that actually at that time of year, the water in the canal is only actually about 3 feet deep. So if I had fallen off, there was a good chance I'd have broken my legs or my neck or something. So I had to wear that inertia reel safety harness. It's only a piece of wire, but if I'd fallen off, it's like a seatbelt. You know, you only fall a couple of feet and then it goes donk. But the trouble is that being there actually made it harder to walk across because it sort of pulls slightly in one direction or the other. And if you're already a bit vertiginous and your head's swaying a bit and you're scared, frankly, then the health and safety device makes it more dangerous. Toy trains I genuinely love, and I have some. I always used to keep it quiet, but I'm now going to admit it. I do have some toy trains, and every Christmas I put the train set up. They're beautiful little bits of engineering, but the failure of them is, unlike a real railway, they never go anywhere. Even if you've got a fantastic layout in a huge attic because you live in a big house, it still might only, the train may never be more than 20 or 30 feet away, whereas real railways go, you know, across Siberia or whatever. So I wanted to send a little toy train on a scale, real-size journey. So 10 miles seemed good to scale. That's 760 miles. That's sort of like going the length of Britain, and that's, you know, a train should be able to do that. Well, the idea behind Scalextric was, it's another demon from childhood, Not Enough Track, which is up there with Not Enough Lego, Not Enough Meccano, and so on. But we wanted a race, because although the train set and Scalextric are almost identical technology, it's, you know, 12 volts DC running a motor that's driving the wheels on, so I think one is a train, one is a car. You don't really race trains. Trains are quite a sort of highbrow activity. So we wanted a race, and we wanted to have the world's longest race, so we could have a world record, and we wanted to do it at or in the shape of a real racetrack. And then we settled on Brooklands because it was the first motor racing circuit in the world, the first purpose-built one. It's incomplete now. It's been incomplete since the end of the war because during the war they used bits of it as an aeroplane factory and the banking gradually got demolished. And that was the premise of it, and that's how we sold it to people. Come and take part in the first race at Brooklands for 70 years. And it is a race, and it is with cars. They're just a bit smaller. A lot of people, this is possibly more true of Lego than any of the other projects, people just came and wanted to make that house. And even though it became very difficult, there were all sorts of structural problems and legal ones because it has to be treated as a proper building and so on, they still stuck with it and made all those bits and made the bits of furniture and the fittings and made it all go together. And they really did devote themselves to it. And in the end, I thought, all this work is only going to last for about 3 days, and then we are obliged by circumstance to pull the thing apart. And I don't think I could bear to see it. But that was a few weeks ago now, and now the trauma of it, the initial trauma has passed. A part of me, in a way, has now become quite pleased that it's gone, because it sort of lived very gloriously and perfectly. You know, it's the evening star burning brightly and all that stuff. And given more notice and more time, maybe we could have found somebody rich and eccentric to rescue it and put it in a gallery or in the garden of their house or whatever. I mean, I would have had it in the garden of my house if I had a garden, but I don't. But it would have decayed, it would have faded in the sunlight, you know, bits would have been nicked, it would have fallen down, and it would have faded away, which would have been a shame. I think at least this way, it was fantastic. It's been superbly recorded in photographs and film, and it's one of the most amazing and stunning things I've ever seen, the Lego house. It absolutely took my breath away when I saw it finished and polished up and cleaned and with all the furniture in. I was speechless. It was just, I wanted to live in it forever. And we can remember it like that. There's a bloke at Legoland in Billund in Denmark said something very interesting. And it was very surreal because he was a retired bloke, but he kept himself amused and earned a bit of extra pocket money by manning the Klondike peat gold mining attraction or whatever it was at Legoland. Anyway, he said, I love coming here. And he said, I like playing with the Lego. And I said, oh, do you think it's good for you playing with Lego? Because a lot of psychologists and so on say that it has genuine therapy value for sort of traumatized minds and so on. And he said, yes, the day you, what was it he said, how did he put it? He said, the day the day you stop playing is the day you start getting ready to die. And I thought that's like the moral for the whole series.